Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are listening to this or watching it, I should say. Uh, I'm Luana Parker, and I am the independent beauty consultant with my own company. Excited to be here with you, and so glad that you chose to join me. Today, I am going to talk some about how you can repurpose an ebook that you may have written. Give you some ideas of ways that you can use it in a different manner and maybe make some money off of it. Now, we all want to do that. So, let me just share with you the purpose of this program. And it's all about talking with authors, wannabe authors, those thinking about being an author, and those someday I'm going to write me a book of authors. We love you all no matter what level you're at. We hope that you'll join us and perhaps think about writing your own book if you haven't done it yet. And if you need some assistance, you're looking for ways to put your book together, you want to perhaps even come up with some ideas about what to write about, because believe it or not, sometimes we just get in that position where the brain does not want to act right. We're thinking, okay, what do I want to write? What do I want to write? What do I want to write about? And nothing comes to mind. Now, I, in the past, what I've done is take a little scene of something that may have happened in my life, and then I'll write a little story about it. Of course, I make it about my characters, wherever I create to be in the story. It's not about me, and that's one way I do for writing a book. In the same way with my self-help book, when I wrote that, and encourage you, in case you are not aware of it, book that I'm speaking of is entitled Courage to Live Your Dream. I wrote this book in 2018, and I wrote it for a very specific purpose. I was going through one of those periods of my life where I felt really down, and it just seemed like everything was going against me. No matter what I did, it just was not working out right. And I got to the point where I just felt like, well, what else is there for me? And I happened to share those feelings with a friend, which is something I don't normally do. Usually I just keep my thoughts and feelings to myself. But for some reason, she seemed to notice that I was off and encouraged me to talk to her about what was going on. And I shared that with her. She was, she didn't try to give me advice. I remember that. She just kind of thought for a moment and then told me that she remembered a time when she felt those same thoughts. What she suggested I do was to take those thoughts and put them on paper. And she said, don't worry about what kind of order they're in. Just put it on paper. Write down all of what you just shared with me. And then once you've done that, after a couple of days, a week, whatever it takes for you to kind of get away from it, then go back and take a look at it and see how you want to edit it. See if it's in the manner that you want it to be. At any rate, I took her advice, and I did I did actually go back and reread what I had wrote down, because at the time, as I was writing, I was just writing whatever came to mind. I wasn't concerned about the kind of order that it was in or how it might read. I just put it on paper. And trust me, when I went back to reread it a few days later, it was all mumble jumble rambling. And what I did was take those sentences that I had written and decide, okay, this one can go. I need to change this. This will make more sense. It was pretty easy to do that once I had the stuff on paper. So that's what I'm encouraging you to do. Take those thoughts and don't worry about how it sounds or looks or misspellings or any of that kind of stuff. Put it on paper. Whatever is bothering you, if you can't think of anything else to write, if there's something that's bothering you, put it on paper. On the other hand, if you're feeling good about something, something wonderful has happened, something very exciting in your life has taken place, put that on paper too. You know, we hear a lot about all the negative things that people go through. And not saying anything is wrong with that, because that's how the rest of us learn when we read about what somebody else has gone through. And when we find ourselves in the same situation, then we know what to do. We have it on paper in a book that someone has shared what they did when they were going through their problems. Not saying that it's going to work out exactly the same for you, but it gives you an idea of what to do. And you may think, oh, okay, I could do this, but maybe just a little this way instead. But you have something to start with. And that's the thing about putting your thoughts on paper and sharing them. So those are good. Those are great. But let's hear about some of those exciting, wonderfully happy things that have happened to some of you. I bet some of you have some great stories to share. Place that you went to travel to. Now, I know a lot of people like traveling overseas. They want to see all these old countries and things. And I wouldn't mind seeing those old countries as well. But the truth of the matter is, that's never going to happen. The closest I'm going to get to those old countries would be to see a video that someone has taken of their trip. So that's how you could help me. When you go on those trips, some videos or pictures of the places that you've been to, put it on a book or put it in a video form and put it out there for me to take a look at it, because I'd love to see those countries. But the truth of the matter is, I don't like flying. I've been on a plane a number of times. I just don't like flying. And there's no way I'm going to sit on a plane for that length of time to get from here to another country. So that's out, okay? The other thing is, I never learned to swim. So I'm not taking a cruise any place. Oh, I know it's crazy. It really is crazy. Ships are totally safe. It's like a city on water. I'm well aware of that. I just have this thing that if something does happen, I don't know how to swim. And who's going to try to save my life when they're trying to save their own life? Okay. So no, wait, no, I'm not going on a cruise anyplace. Sorry. Several people tried to entice me, even had friends. Even my son had told me he would pay for me to go on a cruise ship. He thinks it's wonderful. He's been on several, and he told me he'd like me to go on because it's nothing like it, and I deserve it and all that kind of stuff. But the truth of the matter is, I'm not going. Okay, forget it. Find something else for me to do. Okay, well, enough about what I will or will not do. We're here to talk about you writing. And as I tell you every week, I want you to write. I want you to put your words on paper or on the computer and get it out there to share with others. There's nothing that frees you more than when you put your words on paper, your thoughts. You know, even if it's only to write some things about yourself that maybe you want your kids to know about you, and that you don't want to share now, but they can read later when you've decided to, or your father decides you should come home now. And then they have something to remember you by. They can read your stories and say, oh, this is what my mom was like, or oh, this is how my dad was. This is why he does these things. This is how he was a little boy and he did the same things that I do. Put it on paper, okay? I'm kind of working on that. I haven't done it myself yet either, but I've thought about it. And now that I'm talking about it to you, I realize that really is important to leave some history behind for my family. So that should be something that I give a real serious thought to. Because, the rest of the day isn't even promised to me. Anything could happen. So, enough about that. Let's talk about how you can repurpose a book that you may have written. And there are a number of things that you can do with a book. For example, you could take that book and break it up into, let's say, some blog posts. If you have a blog, you could take sections of your book and write a blog with it. A good way to bring people or let people know that you've written a book if they're not aware of it before is some sections and put it into a blog. You could also turn it into what they call an autoresponder, where you send out each week maybe a small section of what's something that you feel is really important in your book that you want to share with everyone else. You could take it and use pieces of the information and let's say your weekly, monthly, or quarterly company newsletter is something that you could share. That would be exciting. Newsletters used to be on paper, and I used to like doing those. I'm not so good when it comes to doing them over the email, which is supposed to be better. Well, anyway, it's something that you could do. And maybe you could bring back the old way of doing newsletter. I kind of miss the newspapers even. They're not as uh, interesting anymore like they used to be, but that's neither here nor there. A fourth thing that you could do is to create a step-by-step tutorial that's either in written or video format and put it on YouTube. Now, YouTube has become so popular. It's another form of Facebook and a great way to let people know who you are and that what it is that you're doing. So you might want to think about that. Take your information, make it into a lesson form, and just put it on video. Then place it up there on YouTube. You could also use it to create or expand on your website. For example, you might have a frequently asked questions section on your website, and you could answer those questions by using your book if you have the answer in your book. If not, you can find the answer again and put it on there. And that makes people recognize you as someone to go to for their information. We all like to think that we have some sort of influence, good influence out there on people around us. So that's another way that you could do it. You could also ask a friend to do a Q&A style audio or video interview with you by creating a list of questions from the ebook and then have them answer each question. And as your friend asks them, use your book information as the guideline for the answers. A seventh tip would be to create a list of, or maybe a quick reference guide from your material that people could go to when they have questions. Let them know that you are someone who takes your work serious and you're willing to give people answers. And again, if the answer isn't in the book when you're asked, you can always get the answer. Never, never, ever pretend, because people can always see through that. You don't want people to get the wrong opinion or thought or idea about you. So, what about making it into a checklist? You know, for example, in my book, I have 5 steps in here of things that I did to help get me out of my low point. Now, I could take those 5 steps and I could make them into 5 weeks of blog posts that I could send out 1 step a week. or I could make them a checklist that, hey, as I do these things, I check them off. It's just a couple of things that I can do with that little section where I put the steps in. It could also be turned into a worksheet. I could take each one of those steps, ask the step in a question form, and then have space where people could write their answers. And their answers have to be their answers, not what they think I would answer or what they think I might want them to answer. It has to be from within them. But it gives them some place to start, put down their thoughts, and go from there. How about creating an online radio show? You could, I could take each chapter of my book, and it could be a new topic for a series. I could call it 5 weeks to having the courage to live your dreams, or 5 steps to having the courage to live your dream. Something that will always bring people back to my book. Okay. But that's an idea of something you could do, especially if you're doing podcasting or radio shows and you can't think of what you want to do the next week. If you don't have a book, you can always buy a copy of my book and use it, okay? Or someone else. Maybe you have a friend who's written a book, and it doesn't have to be anyone you know. You go on Amazon.com, Barnes and Nobles, or use bookstore, and find some material that you're interested in and make that into a series. You can use your book to, let's say, outline a startup for a YouTube channel that you would have weekly or monthly topics in it. Uh, Great idea to do that if you're trying to figure out what you want to do. That's a whole idea. Now here's another one. This would be great because everybody's doing it now. You could host a webinar about one of the topics in your book, or you could create a series of webinars using different sections or different topics from your book. And you have a choice. You can either do those as a introduction to your book, a free webinar introduction to your book, but at the same time, that book, you're taking it and you've made it into a online course, or you will do a Zoom class, but it would be something that you could actually monetize if you want to. Another thing, you could take the outline of your book and create an e-course for it. Use the information from your book and flesh out each one of the lessons that you have in it, the tips, the chapters, however you want to break it down. So that's just, believe I just shared about 14 tips on things that you can do. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There's some other things that you can do. But I think I'm going to cut it off from there because I don't want to overwhelm you with all the things that you could actually do with a book that you've written. I'll share the balance of those with you those last tips that I have with you next week. So now you have an excuse to come back to find out what else you could do with that book in case I haven't hit one that you've taken a fancy to. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to do, let's see, I have a outline, kind of a fleshing out of a character that I was putting together. And I was having a problem trying to figure out how was I going to describe this character, and I ran into a little bit of problem. And I liked the story idea that was trying to form in my head for her. I don't have a title. I just have this story that kind of was taking shape in my head. But as I learned when I was taking writing class, you got to flesh out your character and fill in all the traits about them, hair color, eye color, facial expressions, any mannerism that they have, way they carry themselves, the whole 9 yards, and get to know that character so well that when you're writing, that character will begin to talk to you and tell you what it is that you need to be sharing with the public about them. So I decided, since I was having a problem doing that because I couldn't figure out what I wanted this girl to really look like. I thought, what if someone was talking about someone that they knew, a really good friend, and they just share a little bit about what they knew about the person. So that's the form that I took when I chose to come up with this character. So I'm going to read what I wrote and hope that it helps you in case you're interested in doing any, let's say, writing, novel writing. I don't know what kind of story this is going to turn into. I have a feeling it's going to be a romance because, as you know, I love romance stories. And so why not try writing one? This one is about a young lady who found herself in a difficult situation. So let's find out all about Brandy Thompson, which is the name of the character. It's actually Brandy Ann Walker Thompson because she got married. Okay, so her friend whose name is Gabrielle, is telling us, me and you, about Brandy. So what do you want to know about Brand? I call her Brand. Her real name is Brandy. Well, let me tell you about her. She was okay looking, but sometimes she looked really homey and other times she looked really pretty. And you will wonder what happened. Her parents loved her, but they loved each other more. And while her father called her a princess, her mother had a bad habit of comparing her to others. You know, why can't you be like so and so is doing blank, blank, blank? Why don't you try to do the same? Fran always felt like she wasn't good enough to be loved for who she was or the things that she could do. I always thought that was too bad because they did love her. Her mother is very pretty, and so are her cousins. However, her mother and father never told her she was pretty. I don't think they ever thought to hug her just because she was their daughter. Except for me, she was a loner. She did join several school clubs, hoping to get out of her shyness. She even tried for cheerleading. It didn't help. When things used to really bother her, she'd go out back, out where she could be alone and just walk the strip. Sometimes she would find a quiet spot and just sit and watch the stars. I think it was the loneliness that caused her to become very easy prey for Charles Thompson. He started dating her in our senior year of high school. She sure blossomed that year. I sort of feel sorry for her though. Behind her back, he would still see other girls. I don't think she ever knew that others were snickering at her. She was so naive when it came to Charles. I never understood why she married him. I couldn't believe that she was actually in love with him. Nevertheless, she said she was. I think she thought no one else would pay attention to her. She went to work to help put him through college. He never stopped playing around on her. After college, he got a job with this really great company and brand. She wanted to start a family, but he said no. He felt they should wait until they were better established. So she continued to work, and their intimate time together became less active. At first, things seemed okay. He went to work and came home afterwards. Sometimes they went out for a night on the town. Then he started coming home late with excuses of having important projects that he was working on. Then he said he had to work extra hard if he wanted to move up in the company. She met his secretary at the office Christmas party. It turned out to be Ava Sherman, one of the girls we went to school with, one of the girls that used to laugh at her behind her back and that Charles was sitting on the side. The day of their 8th-year anniversary, Brian was so happy for the first time in years. Charles had made plans to take Brian out on a town. He sent flowers to her at work and invited her to dinner and dance. I'd never seen her so happy. To say that she was floating on air would not have been an overstatement. She even got permission from her supervisor to leave work early to go home and prepare for her evening out. I have to give it to Charles. He took her to the nicest dinner and dance club in town. Later, they returned home for a night of romance that would make Elizabeth Taylor jealous. I know I was when she told me much later, but I'll get to that later. The next morning, Brand reluctantly went to work. However, she was still walking on clouds. She said that night was one of the happiest of her life. I was truly happy for her. About mid-morning, she called home, but there was no answer. Tried calling Charles at home and in the office several times throughout the day with no luck. I could tell she was concerned, but she just laughed it off. He was nowhere in sight when she returned home that night. And that night she spent alone. The next morning was Saturday, and she was off for the next 3 days. She called Charles' parents, who had moved to Florida 4 years ago, but they said they had not spoken with their son. Fran was now worried about her husband and reported him missing. Monday, she called his office and was told he no longer worked there. Charles had put in his resignation. No, they had no idea where he now worked. After she hung up, she went to check the closet. She realized that some of his suits were missing. She then checked his drawers and found some of his personal undergarments and socks were also gone. Fran was devastated. She still didn't want to believe that he had left her. She did call and cancel her missing person report. She tried to convince herself that he had only taken a trip to be alone and would return. Over the next few weeks, the life seemed to go out of her. She did her job, but there was no longer any joy within her. It was several weeks before she even bothered to tell me that Charles had left her. She probably would not have said anything at all, except that after several times of having to run to the restroom to empty her stomach, I asked if she might be pregnant. It was then she started to break down and cry. I hugged her and told her to meet me at my car, then went to our supervisor and told her what had happened, and that I was going to take her home and would pick her up the next morning to bring her into work. Sarah, a supervisor, agreed and excused her from work after asking if there was anything she could do. I assured her I could handle it and would encourage Brand to speak to her when she returned. I drove Brand home and fixed her a cup of coffee. She had told me what happened. She also told me she was pregnant. She had already seen her doctor and confirmed what she suspected. I asked her what she planned to do. She said she was having her baby, but she wasn't sure how she would be able to work and pay for a babysitter. In the end, she agreed she would speak with her parents and ask for help. The next day after work, Brand went to see her parents. She told them what her situation was. For the first time, they showed Brand their love for her. They held each other and cried, and then her mother took over and told her she was to move in with them and she didn't want any arguments. Moreover, after the baby was born, um, after the baby was born, they would take care of the baby while she went to college, and she and the baby could stay with them. Fran agreed, but she would only agree to go to school part-time while she continued to work. My boyfriend and I helped her move her things to her parents' home. She gave away many of the things she and Charles had gotten while together, and all of the things he had purchased for himself to the Salvation Army. Things settled for her, but she wasn't the same. She rarely smiled, and she seemed to draw into herself. Then her daughter was born. It was love at first sight. The birth of her daughter seemed to prick her up somewhat. When she graduated from business school, she put in for an administrative assistant position and got it. Jason Edwards' company started growing, and he had need of his own personal executive administrative assistant. Brand took a chance and applied for the position. She got it, but made an enemy of Wilma Long. Wilma had wanted that position bad and thought she had it in the bag. I believe that Jason had chose Brand because she was willing to work hard and proven to be dependable and become good at her job. Wilma would have been trouble for him. She was looking for someone to take care of her. I really dislike her. As it was, she never failed to point out something she felt Brand had made an error in doing. Jason never listened to Wilma, which made her angrier. Wilma was always trying to find a way to throw herself at Mr. Edwards and it became bitter at his lack of interest. Mr. Edwards only when it was necessary. Uh, Spoke only when it was necessary to Wilma. He seemed more than satisfied with Brand's work ethics and how hard she worked at her job. Sometimes I called him eyeing Brand, but I don't think she noticed. Jason Edwards became more confident of the success of his company and was often out recruiting more business. Brand is his administrative executives often took on more responsibility. She was good at her job, and Jason came to depend on her more and more. It was the time they attended the board of directors meeting together for the first time that I started noticing a difference in their attitude toward each other. The truth of the matter is, I started thinking Jason may have always had a thing for Brand. He just didn't want to acknowledge it because he had had some bad things happen in his past. I don't know what Mr. Edwards' past was like. He wasn't the kind of person who went around talking about his personal life. It was just something I sensed. Even though he dated other women and some of them came to the office like, Miss, I'm so important and you should look at me and become instantly jealous for Reese Whitaker, who he is currently dating, I still felt there might be something there. However, after that last trip, I noticed that Brand seemed a little self conscious around Mr. Edwards, and sometimes she went out of her way to avoid him. As for Mr. Edwards, he seemed to be going out of his way to be friendlier and offering her more responsibility that seemed to be an excuse to be around her more. She hadn't told me, but I believe one of those set of flowers she received for her birthday was from him. One was from Charles. I know it was because she was going to throw them in the trash, and I asked her why. She said they were from Charles and she wanted nothing from him. I convinced her to let me have them to brighten up my desk. We went to lunch and she still refused to tell me who sent the other flowers, but I did notice that her cheeks took on a warm hue and she refused to look me in the eye. I asked her what made Charles send her flowers for her birthday after not hearing from him from the last 6 years. That's when she told me about running into him at the hotel where the board meeting was held. Now, that's as far as I got. But I thought it was kind of interesting. And we'll just have to see what happens with this little tidbit of information. Well, we're just about out of time, so I just want to tell you guys and encourage you once more about writing. And I'm here to offer my services. If you need any kind of help, just email me at lwrepark@gmail.com. It's lwrepark@gmail.com. And I would be happy to help you. Or you can go over and join my Patreon uh, program. I have a membership over there. Just go to patreon.com/Lawana Parker. Become a member and we can work on that book of yours together. Looking forward to that. So I hope that you enjoyed the little read that I gave to you. It went a little longer than I thought and realized I wrote so much. Also, I hope those tips that I provided will be a benefit to you. If you don't have a book, think about something that's on your mind and maybe write a little bit about it and break it up into steps of how you would handle it. And then take it and use it for some of those suggestions that I read to you. All right. And next week, I'll give you, I believe I have 11 more tips that I can share with you that you can use for repurposing a book or an article that you've written. Maybe even take somebody else's work. You don't have to copy their work word for word. Use your own words. Just look at what they've written and decide, okay, yeah, well, that makes sense, but this is how I would do it, and write it that way, okay? No excuses for writing, not writing. I want all of you out there writing. So that's it for this week. Again, my name is Lawana Parker, and I am an independent beauty consultant. If you have, I would be happy to help any of you if you're looking for someone to talk to about beauty. Again, you can reach me at lwrepark@gmail.com, or you could go to my website, which is beautybylawana.com. Take a look around. All right. I am so happy to be here with you today, and I'm a little sad that I've got to leave now, but I will see you again next week. So until next time, I want you all to take care of yourself, stay safe, and to remember the faith. Until next week.